Good morning and welcome to Coffee Time. I'm just a couple of minutes early. I'm trying to make some adjustments on here, so bear with me as I adjust a few things. We should have a much, oh, there it went again. We did have a very strong audio signal, but it keeps dropping out, so I'm going to keep trying to tweak it here. So in the event that you have difficulty hearing, please let me know. The video signal seems to be very consistent, so I'm not too worried about that. But the audio I was, because it's up and down and up and down. Well, this morning it's a beautiful morning, though we have a nice light breeze in the air. Uh, really pretty outside. It causes us not to remember that there's people who are desperate in need of water today because of the flooding that's occurred in the south. When we look at the map and we see the images, it doesn't really seem to affect us directly. But we need to remember is that people just like us, just like you, just like me, are struggling this morning. So we need to be remembering them and praying for them. Let's also not forget those who have lost loved ones, who are hurting and mourning this morning. So let me put that in there. It is now 10:30, so let me begin with a word or two of prayer, shall I? Gracious and loving Savior, we come to you this morning as we once again begin or take up where we left off with the Bible study. As we learn more of your word, we put it in our heart. Let us forever to be changed, transformed into a closer, more loving image that you see within us and know that what we can become. Our hearts go out to those who are hurting and suffering this day, who don't have enough to drink or shelter from the elements, who are desperate to understand what's next. For those who have lost loved ones and are suffering a horrendous pain this morning because the realization of that missing piece of their life is not easily fixed. Help us as a people of faith to stand in those areas where we might bring love, might bring hope, might bring relief, might be able to bring physical supplies or practical help. Help us, O Lord, to be your most holy people here now and today. Amen and amen. Okay, now we're going to pick it up where we left off yesterday in chapter 18. If you missed yesterday, I had an emergency and had to leave. So I did yesterday's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So today I'm picking it up where I left off, and that is in chapter 18, verse 19. And this is in the midst of after the great battle and after Absalom's death. Now people are afraid to talk to David because they know what happened when Saul and Jonathan died, how David reacted. So we're a little bit gun shy to run directly to him with the news. So here we go. Then Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said. Now he's talking to Joab, okay? Now they just saw the death, and he says, "Let me run and carry the tidings to the king that the Lord has delivered him from the power of his enemies." And Joab said to him, "You are not to carry tidings today. You may carry tidings another day, but today you shall not do so, because the king's son is dead." And then Joab said to the Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." And the Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. Then Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said to Joab, "Come what may, let me also run after the Cushite." And Joab said, "Why will you run, my son, seeing that there is no reward for the tidings?" Again, he's alluding to what happened before. And so he's trying to save him from being killed, is what's happening here. "Come what may, I will run." And so he said to him, "Run." And then Ahimaaz ran away to the plain and outran the Cushite. So he was a fast dude. Now David was sitting between the two gates. The sentinel went up to the roof of the gate of the wall, and then he looked out and he saw some guy running towards him. And the sentinel shouted out and told the king, "Hey, someone's coming." And the king said, "If he is alone, there are tidings in his mouth." He kept coming and drew near. Then the sentinel saw another man running. The sentinel called to the gatekeeper and said, "Hey, there's another one running." And the king said, "He is also bringing tidings." And the sentinel said, "I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, son of Zadok." And the king said, "He is a good man. Come with good tidings." And then Ahimaaz called out to the king, "All is well." And he prostrated himself before the king with his face to the ground and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." And the king said, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" And Ahimaaz said, "Well, when Joab sent your servant, I saw a great tumult, but I do not know what it was." And the king said, "Turn aside and stand here." And so he turned and stood still. And so, come what may, really didn't work out for him. He just kind of lost his nerve, and so maybe he was thinking about that as he was running. I don't know, but he definitely was had second thoughts. Then the Cushite came. Now remember, this is not an Israelite. This is a Cushite. This is an outsider. And the Cushite said, "Good tidings for my lord the king, for the Lord has vindicated you this day, delivering you from the power of those who rose up against you." And the king said to the Cushite, "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" And the Cushite answered, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to do you harm be like that young man." So, in a roundabout way, he said, "He's dead." And the king, deeply moved, went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, "O my son Absalom, would I have died instead of you, O my son Absalom." And so, rather than have the anger he did over Saul and Jonathan, he's a broken person. He's a broken father. Now, this is consistent with what we've seen so far because remember, is that ever since his lustful advances and rape of Bathsheba, things had just gone downhill in a big way. And so he lost his eldest because Absalom murdered him. He lost Absalom, who was the next in line. He lost his daughter Tamar because she's a broken person hiding in Absalom's home. All the other kids are scared to death, and so he's a broken man who is at the mercy of providence, it seems. So the Lord is dealing with him. And this was predicted. Remember, this was predicted. Nathan came in and pronounced the judgment, and the judgment was that he would live to see the destruction of his line, the destruction of his kingdom, the destruction of all that he had built. But someone would rise up and from his line and continue and would be very loved and blessed by God. And so here we go, chapter 19. It was told Joab, "The king is weeping in mourning for Absalom." So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the troops. For the troops heard that day, "The king is grieving for his son." And the troops stole into the city that day as soldiers steal in who are ashamed when they flee in battle. So they hunkered down and crept in. They didn't have a big parade. "Yay, we won, we won." They hunkered down and kind of, walked in slowly and, make sure no big whoop-de-doo. The king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, "O my son Absalom! O Absalom, my son, my son!" Now, he didn't carry on quite like this with Ammon because, Ammon had done something horrifically bad. And Absalom revenged that when David would not act. And so David, because he doesn't act, adds to his own difficulties and in a big way. So now he's lost his sons. And then Joab came into the house of the king and said, "Today you have covered with shame the faces of all your officers who have saved your life today, and the lives of your sons and your daughters, and the lives of your wives and your concubines, for love of those who hate you, and for hatred of those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders and officers are nothing to you. For I perceive that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead today, then you would be pleased. So go out at once and speak kindly to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you do not go, not a man will stay with you this night, and this will be worse for you than any disaster that will come upon you from your mouth until now." And so Joab calls him out and says, "Hey, what the tar are you doing? You need to get out there and thank these troops because they saved your neck and you're not appreciative." Then the king got up, took his seat at the gate, and the troops were told, "See, the king is sitting in the gate," and the troops came before the king. And so, I think that makes good common sense, is that, they're worried about the troops for, if your leader said, "Oh, this is terrible. We should have all died." That doesn't really make a lot of sense. I get that. Okay, So this is verse 9. Meanwhile, all the Israelites had fled to their homes, and all the people who were disputing throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies, and saved us from the hand of the Philistines. Now he has fled out of the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, who we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing the king back?" And King David sent messages to the priests Zadok and Abiathar, and said to the elders of Judah, "Why should you be the last to bring the king back to the house? The talk of all Israel has come to the king. And you are my kin, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then should you be the last one to bring back the king?" And so he says to Amasa. Now remember, Amasa was the leader of Absalom's army. He was after David's blood there for a while. Now, the politics of this are really stinky, okay? And so his own tribe, his own hometown people did not welcome him back immediately, okay? And so there is trouble in River City, and I mean big trouble. "You are not my bone and my flesh, so God do to me more if you are not the commander of my army from now on in place of Joab." And Amasa swayed the hearts of all the people of Judah as one, and they sent word to the king, "Return, both you and all of your servants." And so the king came back to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and to bring him over the Jordan. Okay, now this is huge because what he did is politically he maneuvered someone that had the popularity of the people. Because remember that Absalom had the popularity of the people. And so the people were with Absalom, not with David. Now that he is dead, he has done the same thing he did once before by appointing somebody from a powerful position to undertake the consolidation of all the forces. He did that with Abner. Well, that led to Abner's death, and now he's done it with Amasa, and that replaces Joab. Now remember, Joab, I have a feeling, is not going to take this lightly. Okay, verse 16. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, hurried to come down with the people of Judah to meet King David, and with him was 1,000 people from Benjamin. And Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, with his 15 sons and his 20 servants, rushed down to the Jordan ahead of the king, and while the crossing was taking place, to bring over the king's household and to do his pleasure. And so all these folks are now swarming to the king. And because they're swarming to the king, there's going to be opportunities for David to make new friends, to make amends, to say that everything is forgiven. Okay? Shimei, son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan, and said to the king, "May my lord not hold me guilty, or remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. And may the king not bear it in mind, for your servant knows that I have sinned. Therefore see, I have come this day, the first of all the household of Joseph, to come down to meet you, my lord the king." You see, remember, he's playing on both sides of the fence right now. Now he's pledging his loyalty to him once again. And Abishai, son of Zeruiah, answered, "Shall not Shimei be put to death before this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed?" But David said, "What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should today become an adversary to me? Shall anyone be put to death in Israel this day? For I do not know that I am the king of Israel." The king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." And the king gave him his oath. Okay, and so just to recap, remember when David was fleeing to the land of the Benjamites, Saul territory, and there were people who were angry at him for they believed that he murdered Saul. And his hands weren't completely clean in that affair. And so these loyalists to Saul were throwing all kinds of insults and stones and kicking dirt and hollering at him. And Joab wanted to go up and kill him, and David said, "No, don't do that. This is the Lord's doing, and if the Lord will do it, then let the Lord do it, and let's go on our way." And so Here he now is pledging his fealty and his loyalty to David, and who can blame him? I mean, he was angry about Saul, and now that David's won and he's on top, he knows which side the bread's buttered on. Okay, uh, Mephibosheth, grandson of Saul. Now remember, he's the one that has the lame feet. He has 2 feet that don't work. Okay. He had not taken care of his feet or trimmed his beard or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day the king came back in safety. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king said to him, "Why did you not go with me?" And he answered, "My lord, O king, my servant deceived me, for your servant said to him, 'Saddle a donkey for me so that I might ride on it and go with the king.' For your servant is lame, and he has slandered your servant to my lord the king, but my lord the king is like the angel of God. Do therefore what seems to be good to you, for all of my father's house were doomed to death before my lord the king. But you set your servant among those who eat at your table. What further right have I then to appeal to the king?" And the king said to him, "Why speak any more of your affairs? I have decided. You and Ziba shall divide the land." So Mephibosheth said to the king, "Let him take it all, since my lord the king has arrived home safely." Now remember, there was some drama there early on with him, because David had to find a way to consolidate his power and reestablish good relations with the Benjamites. Well, this is the rightful king to the kingdom here, and so to make certain that nothing would go sideways on this, he brought him into the palace and kept him there, but gave him a lot of land so that he could produce his own food. But then he divided part of that and gave it to Ziba. And so then Ziba was spreading rumors that he was planning an insurrection during the time of Absalom's departure. And so there's all kinds of palace intrigue that's going on with this. All kinds of palace intrigue. Okay, so let's go on to verse 31. Now, Barzillai, the Gileadite, had come down from Rogelim, and he went on with the king to the Jordan to escort him over the Jordan. Barzillai was the very aged man. He was 80 years old, and he had provided the king with food while staying at Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. And the king said to Barzillai, "Come over with me, and I will provide for you in Jerusalem at my side." But Barzillai said to the king, "How many years have I left to live, that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? Today I'm 80 years old. Can I discern what is pleasant and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats or what he drinks? Can I listen to the voice of a singing man or a singing woman? Why then should I be your servant to add a burden to my lord the king?" And so he's saying, "I'm old, I can't see, I can't hear, I can't taste. Why do I need to get all messed up and move over there?" He continues, "Your servant will go a little way over the Jordan with the king. Why should the king recompense me with such a reward? Please let your servant return so that I might die in my own town near the graves of my father and my mother. But here is your servant Chiman, and let him go with you, my lord, and do for him whatever seems good to you." Okay. And the king answered, "Chimham, go over with me, and I will do for him whatever seems good to you, and all of you desire of me, I will do for you." Okay, so here we have this wealthy older man who takes this younger man and says, "Here, he was probably from his household. Here, take him and do with him as you please." Okay, so he gets another servant out of the deal. Then the people crossed over the Jordan, the king crossed over, and the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own home, and the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went with him, and all the people of Judah, and also half the people of Israel brought the king on his way. So a big welcome wagon went to get the king. Then all the people of Israel came to the king and said to him, "We have your kindred people of Judah stolen you away, and brought the king and his household over the Jordan, all the David's men with him." All the people of Judah answered the people of Israel, "Because the king is near of kin to us, then why are you angry over this matter? Have we eaten at all at the king's expense, or has he given us any gift?" But the people of Israel answered the people of Judah, "We have 10 shares in the king, and in David also we have more than you. Why then do you despise us? We Were we not the first to speak of bringing him back? But the words of the people of Judah were fiercer than the words of the people of Israel. Okay, now, here's more of that divide. Remember that Saul, being the very first king, really didn't have a good control over the entire country. He was from the northern end of the kingdom. All his people were from the northern end, and there's still some of that northern end ties that go very, very deep. And so you've got a lot of tribal distinctions, and this is what we refer to as the people of Israel. The southern half of the country is dominated by Judah, and so that's why it's called Judah. And so David coming from that place, they feel a kinship to David, and so the two sides are starting to, or not starting, but continuing to draw lines. When early in David's kingship, he was able to get those lines somewhat erased, and he brought the whole country together. Now remember, when he was in exile before, when Saul was chasing him, let's not forget that he was going on raiding attacks to the south, and he was shoring up the pathway that led down to Egypt, the trade route, the major trade route. That's what that was going on there. And so he was making friends with the people of Judah the entire time that he was with the Philistines. Now, when he gets back into power, he's at Hebron, and Abner, who is the go-to person after Saul and Jonathan have died, he temporarily puts in place another son, and that didn't last very long. And then Abner takes over himself, and Abner brings all the people with him to David. Okay, so because of Abner, the northern kingdoms followed David. Okay, David won the popular vote in the south. Abner brought the people together. Abner dies, and so David's been trying to establish those relationships from that point forward. Okay, let's continue. Now a scoundrel, I love that. Now a scoundrel named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjamite, happened to be there, and he sounded the trumpet and cried out, "We have no portion in David, no share in the son of Jesse. Everyone to your tents, O Israel." And so the people of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri. But the people of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. And so now the people are split. People are divided. The king came to the house at Jerusalem, and the king took 10 concubines whom he had left to look after the house, and put them in a house under guard, and provided for them, but did not go to them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. Now that was tactical, okay? Because Absalom had gone up to the roof and laid with all the concubines, saying he was king. Okay, that taking the king's stuff made you king. So he was king at that point. Now, David wants nothing to do with them. Nothing at all. They're still his responsibility, but he wants nothing to do with them because of what has happened. He doesn't want to reclaim something that was already his, and that's what it would look like. And so he locks them away and says, "I want to have nothing to do with you the rest of your lives." That is harsh. I gotta say, that is harsh. Then the king said to Amasa, "Call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." And so Amasa went to summon Judah. But he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed to him. And David said to Abishai, or got that all turned around. It's Abishai. "Now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your lord's servants and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities for himself and escape." Joab's men went after him, and after the Cherethites and the Pelethites and all the warriors. These are hired hands. These are mercenaries. Okay, they went out from Jerusalem and pursued Sheba, son of Bichri, which they were when they were at the large stone that is Gibeon. Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at the waist. As he went forward, it fell out. Joab said to Amasa, "It is well with you, my brother." And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not notice the sword in Joab's hand, and Joab struck him in the belly so that his entrails poured out on the ground, and he died. He did not strike a second blow. This is the second time that he has done this same move. You know, the first time he did this move was with Abner. Now, the second time he did this move, it's with Amasa. Oh my. Amasa lay wallowing in his blood on the highway, and the man saw that all the people were stopping. Since he saw that all who came by him were stopping, he carried Amasa from the highway into the field and threw a garment over him. So he took him off the road and chucked him into the dirt, put something over him so no one would see him, and then went on his way. Once he was removed from the highway, all the people went on to after Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. Oh my gosh. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth-maachah, and of all the Bichrites, assembled and followed him inside. Joab's forces came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-maachah, and they threw up a siege ramp against the city, and it stood against the ramparts. Joab's forces were battering the walls to break it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen, tell Joab, come here, and I want to speak to you." And he came near her, and the woman said, "Are you Joab?" And he said, "I am." And then she said to him, "Listen to the words of your servant." "I'm listening." And then she says, "They used to say in the old days, 'Let them inquire at Abel, so that they would settle a matter.' Now I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord?" And then Joab answered, "Far be it from me, far be it that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. But a man in the hill country of Ephraim, called Sheba, son of Bichri, had lifted up his hand against the king. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw from the city." And then the woman said to Joab, "His head shall be thrown over the wall." Wow. Oh man, this has more twists and turns than a soap opera. More twists and turns than a soap opera. And so then the woman went to all the people with her wise plan and threw it out to Joab. And they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city and went on their way home, while Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel, and Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was in command of the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of the forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the recorder, and Sheva was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests, and Ira the Jairite was also David's priest. So that's 3 priests now. Okay. Now, there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, and David inquired of the Lord. And the Lord said, "There is blood guilt on Saul and on his house, because he put the Gibeonites to death." And so the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the people of Israel, but the remnants of the Amorites, although the people of Israel had sworn to spare them. Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. David said to the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make expectation that you might be blessed, the heritage of the Lord?" And the Gibeonites said to him, "It is not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house. Neither it is for us to put anyone to death in Israel. Neither is it for us to put anyone to death in Israel." And he said, "What do you say that I should do for you?" And they said to the king, "The man who consumed us and planned to destroy us, so that we should have no place in all the territory of Israel, let 7 of his sons be handed over to us, and we will impale them before the Lord at Gibeon on the mountain of the Lord." And the king said, "I will hand them over." Oh no. More blood is shed and spilled. More blood and more blood and more blood. So here is the situation. Okay. And so David mourns the loss of his son. Joab, just dresses him down and says, "You need to get out there." And so he gets out there and he thanks the troops. And then he appoints somebody over the troops other than Joab. Joab doesn't like that. He didn't take that sitting down at all, because the next time there was an insurrection led by Sheba, he followed behind, or followed ahead actually, was disguised as a soldier, and then approaches Amasa, takes out his blade in the one hand, grabs him by the beard in the other, and slices open his gut and spills his guts. Now, why didn't David react? Well, that's pretty consistent. David hasn't been reacting to anything good or bad. He's been allowing things to just happen. And so that leads to more turmoil and more turmoil. Remember, blood guilt or the spilling of blood can only be repaid with more blood. God does not tolerate that. And so once this starts going, there is no end to it. It's just death upon death upon death upon death upon death. And that's where we're going to stop today, and we're going to pick it up tomorrow, where this is quite a conundrum because David promised to spare the life of Jonathan's kin. How is he going to get around that, do you think? I have a feeling that it's not going to work out too well. Okay. Well, that's where we are for today. I hope and pray that you have a wonderful and blessed day and that you enjoy the beauty of this day. So with that, take care. Remember, God loves you, and so do I. Have a wonderful day.